everybody, it's Drybear. And the EP at Embark that is heading up, Arc Raiders, did an interview today talking about the Server Slam results, future updates, season plans, a possible roadmap, and a few other things as well. So today we're going to dive into the dev interview, because I know that a lot of people are just waiting for Arc Raiders to come out and you're looking for your fix. First, I want to talk about what was the difference between Server Slam and the full release of the game. So a lot of people that didn't play the tech test or have seen other parts of the game jumped into Server Slam and felt like it was light, and that's because it was. And you may have been hearing from other people along the way that, hey, don't worry, there's a lot more to the game than there is in the Server Slam. So let's hear it from the dev himself on what they think the amount of content that was in the Server Slam relative to what you'll be able to play in just about 5 days here.
When it came down to progression, that was a very short progression. I think it capped out at around 5 hours. There wasn't really much more to do after that, and of course there's a lot after that you can do. A lot of things to unlock, a lot of enemies to defeat, quests to complete. So that I would say from a progression perspective that was only 10 to 15% of what the game is. And some features weren't even present at the Server Slam itself, because they are features that come later in the game experience. So they were a bit unnecessary to have there. So the objectives with Server Slam was kind of twofold for us. We wanted to make sure that we had some full technical pressure tests on the game to make sure the game ran as expected. And the other one was to give some players that didn't have the chance to get their hands on previously to get the chance to play the game. And even though in a slightly more focused fashion, as it wasn't the same type of test as the previous one, much shorter and focused around there's the opening experience and one map. There will be 4 launch day, and there's rumors of a place called Stella Montis, but the Raiders of Speranza haven't really figured out how to get there yet. From the maps perspective, you saw like one of our kind of 4 starting maps and a couple of the conditions that could run. So we had the Night Raids, Queen, we had the Electromagnetic Storm, a couple of different variants of the map dam.
So that means only 15% of the total progression for the game was playable during the Server Slam, which is where most people tried the game out. There are a lot more weapons of higher rarity, and there's also attachments. So if you ever used an attachment, especially a high rarity attachment for a weapon, a lot of the legendary attachments for weapons completely change how they function. Like sometimes turning a pistol into a shotgun, having it shoot multiple bullets at once, things like that. So not only are we going to get a lot more weapons, equipment, modifiers, and also utility items that we can use, like zip lines or the cloak, like actually going into the shroud cloak and hiding yourself from enemies. A bunch of really cool interactions in the game as well, but also a whole bunch of other things that you can progress through the game, combined with new quests, new areas to look at. And as he mentioned, they also talk about how there's going to be 4 overall maps. You saw this on the Rust Belt mini map screen on the main menu of what maps were available in the Server Slam. But we only got to play 1 of them in the Server Slam, and there's 3 others that are there. But in this interview specifically, he mentions there's a 5th map that has some kind of mystery going on with it that they've been saving for release. And we've heard this actually many times in several different interviews for Arc Raiders, them talking about how they've been holding stuff in the chamber to make people have to experience it for the first time in release, so that the people that played the tech test and the people that played the Server Slam don't spoil those things for everybody else. So they have stuff waiting for us for the full release, including this secret 5th map that has some kind of activation condition for you to get to actually play. Next, he touched on a comment that I think is really interesting, and I'm sure a lot of people that like the game will resonate with, and that's about the immersion and storytelling of a game like this. Now, we'll talk in a second about how they felt about their early tests. We've talked about this a little bit before, but he talks a lot about how the immersion of the world is a big part of it, how you'll have a new codex system that's about reading up on the backstory of the world of Speranza, the tunnels that are hiding in Speranza and how you can explore them, as well as the advent of the arcs, why the arcs exist. And you can reference this codex, collect, journal entries and secret lore bits and stuff, and how they focused on making the world as immersive and vivid as possible so that they can focus on the exploration aspect. It's not just a PvE game. It's not just an extraction game. They wanted it to be a universe that you dive into and you're interested to learn more.
A lot of us were big fans of extraction shooters. And me particularly, but also Stefan, who's the creative director. Both me and him and a few other people have been spending too many hours playing extraction shooters and other survival games, by the way. So we were really fan about the mix where players and Arc is kind of, or players and AI meet. That was something that is magical in our opinion, and still think has not really come to its full potential even today. And so we felt like this world wanted to be explored. Like we were walking around these derelict buildings, and I was like, what happened here? And I was walking around these empty hallways, and I felt like there's a game here that is about like what happened to this world, and there is a danger and a sense of tension that we want to capture and put in here. And it became pretty clear that going for a model, an extraction game, was a way for us to achieve all the things we wanted for the IP, and we felt was the right things for us. We really felt strongly about there was stories to be told in this world, and the ways for players to find out what happened, who's living here, what is the Ark, why are they here. And a lot of interesting things around that. Together with other players and the AIs themselves, there was a mix that we knew that we wanted to go for on the extraction shooter side. But we also knew at that point that we didn't want to build a game that was super hardcore either. We knew we wanted to build a game that was a bit more approachable, because some of the tension that you can get in those games is so good, and we believe that some of the games are so difficult that feeling, on the tension that you can get from playing some of those games is something that I don't think many players will get to feel in those games. So we wanted to make sure that we could build a game where other people also could get the sense of that tension and excitement that genre can bring to the table. So that kind of was the starting point, you could say, for the reset, as we like to call it.
I think a lot of people resonate with that idea, is that they get into Arc Raiders and they get the feeling of fighting the robots, fighting players, feeling the atmosphere of what's going on, and hopefully with the expedition system, sending off your raider and getting a new one, or talking to all the vendors and traders is a big part of experiencing the game. And there's also a lot more to find in the world too, because once we have 20 to 30 different weapons, each with their own attachments that can change how they function, as well as more quests, maps to explore, and conditional settings on the maps themselves. So a map may be different at night during a night raid, or during an electrical storm, or if there's a harvester event, right? That helps them feel fresh and new as you go along. We also talked a little bit about the vibe and aesthetic as well. Some of this gets into the art style, and something we talked about when the art director was interviewed a couple days ago as well, but talking about there are a lot of different ways to do post-apocalyptic, and they very specifically wanted to create a world that has that tension and has that fear, but it's not like dark, dreary, and hopeless.
It's what the team wanted themselves. They wanted to be immersed. So a lot of this comes down from, so for the audio people, let's say Bensu, who is our audio director, he wants to be immersed in this world, and he wants to kind of have audio be an important part of that. The same thing is for the environment team. They want you to be immersed in it. They want to tell a story, and they want to make the game stand out. And I think so that's one part on the passion about driving immersion as part of the craft that you're doing and the craftsmanship. But on the other hand, it's about finding an identity of a product that isn't necessarily too adjacent to anything else that is out there, to make it stand out on its own. So the early explorations that were made around Arc Raiders, they knew that they wanted to do something that didn't feel too gloomy and uninviting, and maybe it's cool in its own sense, but we wanted something that felt a bit more optimistic, like the world, even in the world that the Arc Raiders is taking place. It's not the world that is gone to hell. It's actually on a world that things have started growing again. It's in the post-apocalypse, but it's not in the kind of nuclear post-apocalypse. There is hope and positivity in this world. Yes, there are arcs, and they are dominating the surface, and for the raiders, that's a massive challenge. But at the same time, you can see the world has gotten back on its feet after what looks like a pretty devastating blow to itself. So that was that. We also have some personal preferences here. So there's people who have like the characters you see in the background. This is, I would say, they're very much on our art director. That's very much his style. So I think there's a lot of personality here that comes through from the contributors as well. So it doesn't have like one answer. It's a bit more organic than it being. It sounds maybe deliberate, and it is to some degree, but it also comes through the process of building the game.
And I toss it to you. Do you get that same feeling when you get into Arc Raiders? How do you feel about the atmosphere, the environment art, the character art, the the hard surface art of like the weapons and how they function and come together, the backpacks and the gadgets, as well as the Arc robots that are around? How do you feel about the atmosphere of the game? Do you feel like it is post-apocalyptic or something else entirely? Next, I want to touch on that briefly because there are still people that are harping on this out there, so it's worth at least including it in the video. Since the early tech test, especially tech test 2, which was quite different than what we got for Server Slam, some people noticed that there was a noticeable degradation in the visual appearance of the game. And a lot of that comes down to performance. I think a lot of people, especially if they haven't worked in software, don't really understand how hard it is to get performance to work well, and also making it work well, like making things performant, comes at a pretty significant price, and usually you have to make concessions that you otherwise wouldn't like to in general. And there's definitely people on the side of like, hey, I get that you're trying to make it, better for the min spec and making it option, but if I do have an enthusiast level machine, or I have like a plus console, why can't I have higher options, right? If we're going to cater to the lower end to make sure more people can play the game, what about the higher end? So this was the comment that he had, the executive producer had, around the visual fidelity of the game, the drop, and also the sacrifices made to make the game performant.
I think that's fair. I mean, some people did like an A/B comparison, and there's a difference there. And so there's a couple of things going on, to be frank. First of all, we've been optimizing the game quite heavily. We have a pretty ambitious optimization for low spec. We want to make this game to be able to be played by a lot of players. So what happened since the last test is that we've been pushing some of the settings down, the default settings. So if you, based on your hardware, we would choose a little bit more conservative settings for PC users, and some other things like details and scatter has also been changed since that. So, but we are looking into there was some bugs in there as well that was unintentional. So we are looking into tweaking and striking the right balance between the image quality and the performance. And of course, for anyone that is a PC player, you're more than welcome to tweak the settings according to your personal preference. And I would recommend doing that for all PC players, to try to find the right balance between what, how responsive do you want the game to be and versus the level of detail.
Now, I can tell you, after being yelled at by the performance team for years on end, this is an ongoing thing, and ultimately at the end of the day, what you don't want to have happen is the reverse, right? I think it's much better, as much as people may hate to hear the truth, right? Sometimes the truth is hard to swallow, but it's much better if we talk about extremes, right? Which isn't reality, but it's worthy as a thought experiment. Your two choices are either A, the game comes out, it looks great, and it runs like crap. And there's tons of games that do that nowadays, where they come out, they have tons of like hitching, frame drops, lots of like just really bad stability and performance, but the game looks awesome. And then the other option is, well, you're going to notice some downscaling, but the game runs like butter, right? It's very responsive and very clear. And I think if you had to choose in this fake scenario that I'm creating in my mind, I think people would prefer to have the one that performs well. Now, the reality is somewhere in the middle in that gray area, right? Obviously, if you shell out for a very expensive machine that can handle anything, you want to be able to put it on the highest fidelity possible. So having that as an option is great. Generally, that just means extra buckets for the level of detail, as well as increasing the download size because you need higher level assets as part of that overall download. But I think in general, making it perform first is great, and then they can work and build upon that over time. In this interview, there was no mention around, the disparity in gameplay clarity through the different buckets, right? We talked about this a little bit a couple days ago, how as with many online games, if you set everything to low, there are advantages you get in being able to see things that other settings won't. But this was their response on the Fidelity change from the earlier tests to the server slam. Next, the topic of resets and wipes came up. Now, they've been in general pretty wishy-washy on this, but they did put out the Expedition project as a very loose, non-detailed blog post about 2.5 weeks ago or so. We already covered that on this channel as well. But this was their response from the EP saying, what they want, what's their philosophy on resets and the game valuing people's time, right? It sounds like they really don't want the game to have a required amount of playtime to get value out of it, which is what happens with seasonal resets and rotational resets, because if you don't hit your rewards before the reset happens, a lot of times you feel like you're missing out. So what's the philosophy from Embark on this topic?
In many extraction shooter games, there's sort of mandatory wipe where everybody gets reset some points during the year or at regular intervals. It's a good way to keep the game interesting and fresh, and for players to kind of re-experience the game again. So I think one of the issues that we had with that is that we didn't feel that every player had the chance to kind of to get to where they wanted to be in their progression before they got reset, and it didn't really feel like it respects the player's time commitment. And that's one thing that we discussed a lot. Is I think it's super important if you're playing a game that the game somehow recognizes the time you have put into it. It displays that back to you and awards you for it. And also we didn't want the players to feel like they had to play the game in a specific amount of hours every week, or you need to be there every week to get everything. So we would like you to play the game at your own pace. So we implemented a system where a player can choose to take its raider on an expedition, which basically means we retire that raider and they get to start over. And all of the players that want to do this, they can choose to do that themselves. So they can send off their raiders, they get a new one, and they get to start their progression over. But if you just want to continue playing, that's perfectly fine as well. And if you want to get to an expedition later, you can choose to join an expedition at a later point. Basically, your raider building, building a device that can take you through the tunnels of Speranza. So in the world of Arc Raiders, there's massive amounts of tunnel networks that spreads out everywhere, and the Raiders doesn't even know where all these tunnels lead. That information is lost to the Raiders that live there. So an expedition in this case means that you're actually constructing your own kind of rail cart, and once that is completed and you put in a lot of supplies in it, it is your idea that your Raider then goes away and might never be heard from again. Who knows? Because there's other things that happens in the world. But you explore these tunnel networks with this cart, essentially. Yeah, so you can get all the way through the end of the progression, and as we will also add more things for you to do over time. So our goal is to basically, if you don't want to, you certainly don't have to. But if you want to, there's some bonuses that you can unlock by doing that.
Anytime we talk about kind of unsolidified directional decisions from developers, we always want to just kind of understand what their philosophy is, right? It sounds like they're really trying to go off a set of principles or values. They admit that the system might not be complete or exactly what they want it to be at the end, but it sounds like their core pillars for resets is A, they want the game to feel like it's respecting your time, but also valuing your time and showing that time in a way that's meaningful to you. So it's not just on a schedule there, but also they want to be mindful of your pacing too. A lot of times with these kind of seasonal games or forced reset games, say you have something come up, have a family member emergency, or you have something at work, or you just get really busy and you can't play. It feels like you fall out of that loop because, the pace the game wants you to play it doesn't match the pace you're able to play it. Whether that's always true or not is kind of irrelevant. And so their philosophy here is they want you to be able to progress through the progression systems and the unlock systems and the prestige systems in Arc Raiders at your own pace and figure out what works for you. And then if you want to build this little card and send your raider off into the tunnels and start over to get some benefits, you can. If you don't want to, you don't have to. Or maybe you do it every other expedition. So maybe every 4 months or every 6 months you do it to try and get it. And it just really fits your structure there. I think it's important to note that obviously they're going to be monitoring this and seeing what works, what doesn't, that sort of thing. So expect updates as we go along for the next couple months on how they figure things out. But they were very clear on their intentions. They want it to feel like it's a big part of whatever your life setup is. They want it to fit into that so you can enjoy the game in general. And this is even echoed by the sentiment that the EP had here at the later stage in the interview, talking about the kind of game they want it to be, the foundation they have for the future, and also echoes some of the sentiment we got from the design director last week, going over how they have the platform. They're not entirely sure how it's going to look over time, but they have the right foundation and they want to build on it. And if things don't work, they will adapt and change after the game goes live.
Arc Raiders is a very different game. It doesn't necessarily abide by the exact same rules. It's not a game that it is bound to seasons and season passes in the same way. We want to keep a little bit of a more flexible approach for Arc Raiders for at least for the beginning, so we can find what's best for Arc Raiders in the live service. I don't think we have the answer, to be honest with you, about exactly how to run Arc Raiders as a live service, but I do think we have the pillars and the components that we need. We just need to kind of get in there and figure it out as we go. I think that's part of what makes this fun, though. It's like if people always keep telling you about what challenges that you will face, then why would you keep going and face those challenges? I think some of the challenges just needs to come, and you're just going to have to deal with them heads on, as on a challenge by challenge basis. Maybe it's a little bit naive, but I think that, to be honest, we wouldn't have built Arc Raiders if we weren't a little bit naive, and it would never have happened. I think you need some of that. Like, yeah, we can do that. Yeah, of course we can do that. And if not, I don't think anything like this could ever happen. So it's kind of part of the process, I guess. They're going into the unknown and figure it out as you go.
Which I think is an excellent answer. And I think that's kind of where the same kind of humbleness that you would want from most game developers. A lot of times when I see these Embark interviews or I see the developers talk, I'm very impressed with their responses and also just how they approach these kind of situations, because it's honest. I think there are definitely a lot of games that come out where you see, a stakeholder or, a director or someone at like the executive level that comes out and says, this is the greatest game you'll ever play. We have it perfect. It's locked down. The formula is exactly what you want. There's nothing that anyone can feel for this game other than the greatest feeling in the world. Whereas a lot of times when we see Embark talk about it, they're like, hey, we think we have something. We're happy with it. And we're just going to wait to see what the players think. And if things don't work, we will adapt and adjust. And I think that is the best answer possible. There was also another kind of reiteration in this interview specifically that we got from the other developers last week when we saw this, which is basically just talking about how it's kind of, it's all about starting with a vision and delivering on it. And this is something that I'm super passionate about as well, as an ex-developer and now as a consumer in general as well, that I think every developer should develop a game where they're trying to create something that they like, right? There's a foundation that they're building it for themselves, and they're going towards a gameplay experience that they're creating. And I think that a lot of games now that gaming has become one of the most lucrative businesses and industries in the world, is we do often get games that are built for profit, right? They're like, hey, we saw that, Dark Souls sold this well, so let's see if we can make a game that makes the same or more money than that possible. And when you start approaching it from money first rather than gameplay first, it really messes things up. So let's hear from the EP kind of reiterating this idea and how they had a vision, they stuck to it, they muscled through, and then they're going to be flexible based on what players think. But the foundation, right, the things that they bounce their ideas off of is themselves, the game that they want to make, the vision they want to create, and then they're just allowing everyone to interact with it and give feedback on it rather than just saying, how can we make the most money possible?
So we've taken a long time on Arc Raiders, so I know that doesn't feel like that maybe for people who are looking at the market, and there's a lot of extraction shooters now, but back then it really wasn't. And we felt like there was an opportunity to be an early entrant to the market, and it's a bit of a different one than the ones that were there. But we realized quickly that a rush to get to market isn't going to get the game that we wanted. And we needed to stay true to the vision that we had with the game and give the game the time it needed to be as good as it possibly could be. So we had to stay true to our vision, and at some point we just stopped looking at the rest of the competition and just felt comfortable. But we just need to do this, and took. So we I guess you could say we put on some blinds from the market,
right,
and just decided it's like, this is what we're doing. Nothing else really matters now. Let's just focus on that.
Which I love it. I think that the gaming industry in general would be better off if more developers, studios, and decision makers had this perspective, right? You find tons of everything from the very bottom to indie games to single A, double A, triple A, or quadruple A, whatever you want to call it. You know, gamers making games and having their own unique perspective on things is what enriches the environment of gaming, and it should just be about the experience and the variety that gets offered from having different developers with different backgrounds and preferences all coming together to make different games, which is super cool. Next, I want to touch on the idea of PvE versus PvP. This was mentioned by some of the developers that we had last week, but let's hear it directly from the executive producer, right? If people have been following this project since it had its early external testing, it was always a PvE game. It was about going topside, fighting arc bots, collecting materials, extracting, and being done. So somewhere along the way, there was a big change from PvE to PvEvP, so including enemy players, combat, PvP, that sort of thing. Some people really love this change, and one of the reasons why they like the game in general. There's also a lot of people that were pretty upset about it. The fact that they don't want, PvP mixed in. They don't want to be camped or griefed by PvPers or people that steal your loot, or you spend this whole time farming up a whole bunch of materials. You get to the extraction point and then someone's camping in a bush and takes all your stuff, and that ruins the experience for them. So from the EP specifically, why shift from PvE to a mix of the two, and why was it important for them?
So I wasn't part of the team since the beginning. So actually I was brought on board right before we did that change. So you could say I was probably a reason for the change to happen in the first place. But me aside, the reality was that the game that we built when I first started here, it wasn't consistently fun. It certainly had some really strong moments and cool to be fighting these large robots. But the problem is that when we kept coming back to the game again and again and again and trying to grind and make it didn't really gel in the way that I think that you or any other players would have found any fun. So the product wasn't there. The ideas were there and some execution were there, but there wasn't a game there in that I believe had the legs that it needs to have in this environment. So we started mapping out all the weaknesses and strengths of the game. And I made this massive Miro board, which is like a way, put out posters virtually with everybody. And we were trying to kind of take, okay, where do we take this game from here? We knew that PvP probably had to be part of it because a lot of our DNA comes with PvP. And we felt like too much focus on the PvE isn't less on the robots themselves. Only focusing on them is basically the same problem we've been having all along. So we knew we needed to make this game about something that was PvPvE. That came clear pretty early. So we mapped out all the strengths, and we wanted to keep as much as possible. So Arc Raider was already announced. The IP was out there. It had an interesting world. And people really resonated with the characters and the visuals and the themes around it. So we knew we wanted to maintain all the positives, but then letting go of some of the focus on the negative side. So it has changed a lot, as you mentioned as well, over the course of those tests that we have run, both the more internal one, which wasn't public facing, and the more public facing ones. So I guess it's worth mentioning that it's been going on for quite some time, this game. Yeah. So in the beginning, I felt like when we announced that we did change the game, there was more resistance to the idea of extraction shooter. There was more people feeling that we were just jumping onto the bandwagon. And to be frank, the first test we did was not great. The results we got was not great. They pretty much showed us what we needed to improve pretty clearly. So that was far from a home run already at that early stage. I mean, it had some good points for sure. That wasn't we weren't worried in that way, but we had a lot of work ahead of us. So we've been pretty systematical about addressing the things that the feedback that we have received about extraction shooter and our ambition to make that a bit more approachable for players. And also try to bring in some new elements to the genre itself, which we felt like we were more familiar with in world building and things that immersion, things that we have been working on for a long time before we even started at Embark here. So we felt like we can bring some new things to the table, and we've seen the feedback consistently improve over the course of these tests. And the last public test we did was almost a bit surprising to us about like how people saw what we were doing and took it to heart. And that was a very humbling experience, and also good. It also felt good, obviously. And Server Slam, even though in its limited fashion, kind of showed the same results. That people are excited, they want to play the full experience. They see what we're doing, and they're appreciating what we're doing. And I think in a way that it surprises me, quite frankly.
Also, quick little note, they did a post over the weekend talking about how they're changing some things in the game. We covered this a little bit as well. They talked about how they're making it so the bots can't see you in the brush as easily, which was kind of how it was phrased. But from this interview, we get the actual truth is that the bots were actually seeing through foliage completely, and it was actually a bug.
We had the AI. It was basically able to see through any kind of vegetation. So people complained about some of the power of the flying drones. Yeah, well, that's because they saw you through the foliage.
Right.
So that's a bug that snuck in quite late.
So I guess you're one of those people that's thinking they were just caving to feedback in general. It sounds like they were just fixing a bug. And lastly for this, I just want to kind of talk about their after release plans. They don't have anything really rock solid on this. They say that they have some surprises for us on launch. They say they have a post-release plan as well as, the first couple months of launch, and they're already planning out 2026 updates. They've mentioned that they want this to be a 10-year game, and so they're going to keep working on how to make this an overall game in general. But let's hear it directly from the EP on what their plans are going into the release and the post-launch update. He does mention that there is a roadmap on the way, probably around the time that we launch in general, and also talking about some things that might be coming in a major holiday/Christmas update, which we're at the end of October here. That's, in the next 2 months, will be, or like a month and a half, something that will bring more arcs to the game, potentially new weapons, new maps. Let's hear it directly from him.
Yeah, so our ambition is to keep these updated on a consistent basis with new content, maps, and arcs, and quests, and all things, new systems and things. We have a pretty ambitious post-launch plan for the game, and we'll see. Maybe we'll see something before Christmas that has something to do with the mentioned Stella Montis. Okay. Maybe sure. There might be more arcs abound shortly, but definitely will be a couple of bigger updates before the New Year's, and the next year is kind of being planned out right now. So we'll have a roadmap that hopefully we can go live with in a couple of days. I can explain this a bit more in detail, but things are a bit in flight still, as it should be.
So there you have it, the latest from the devs. We are so close to release at this point, just under 5 days left for the full release. A lot of information coming with that as well, but let me know what you're most excited about the game in the coming days. Are you going to be playing right on launch day? Do you have other responsibilities that you'll be taking care of, or maybe you're just waiting to see how the launch goes before you even pick up the game at all, sound off in the comments down below. If you found value in today's video, leave a like down below, leave a comment for the algorithm to help this video get seen by more people, and don't forget to check out my other channels for other content and other stuff and other things.